question is, how much of the phone can you get into the chip? And that's what we're looking at right now. I mean, what more of the radio components can you bring in? What degree of integration can you really bring to the entire system? And I think the answer is probably more. I don't know that it's necessarily a class of things, although we are looking at how do you improve sensors and machine-to-machine and that kind of stuff. Are there new radio technologies, you know, like the peer-to-peer stuff, but this LTE direct technology which allows you to detect things at very low power that are in the environment around you. So those kinds of things are going into the phone. So yeah, so I'd say it's probably that kind of stuff and more the radio technology, you know, in response to the question earlier about LTE roaming. And we just got a lot more bands that are going to go in. I think that kind of stuff is going to get integrated.
Hi. What is the importance and the contribution of Brazil to Qualcomm's business today regarding not only the demand aspect but also R&D, since you announced early this year an investment there to build a technology center? So
we've had a very interesting relationship in Brazil over time. It's been up and down, and now I would say it's up again. And you might have noticed that we just promoted somebody who was born in Brazil to be one of the top leaders of our chipset business, Cristiano Ramon. And we've actually been doing some interesting things down in Brazil with the government, talking about things like sponsored connectivity, where you have a smartphone. So a person might be able to buy a smartphone, but then the cost of the service is high. But we want to provide the access for people to get to, for example, government-sponsored websites or information services. So I've been talking with the government about actually having a thing like a toll-free number, but for data, so that people can get government services on smartphones. And then they're looking at different tax regimes for smartphones and so forth. So that's one side of it. And obviously the networks are now rolling out much more rapidly. And then on the R&D side, we've actually done, we were doing R&D in the past, software R&D down there through a wholly owned subsidiary. That program, you know, we canceled that program. Wasn't working exactly right. And now I would say what seems to me to be the most likely is that that's what we will staff up again. We're focusing on a lot of software R&D because we were, I think, very successful. At least the program that they were working on wasn't successful, but the work that was done there was outstanding. So I think that's probably, you know, the best opportunity for us.
Dr. Jacobs, several technological companies changed their business model. Last week, Microsoft entered on tablet market. Google maybe make its tablet too. Is it interesting for Qualcomm to return on a smartphone and tablet market with its own device?
No. I lived through that experience. You know, we have such good partners, and they focus extremely well on how to bring the technology to the end user. We haven't done that well through our history. We've been very, very good, I think, at projecting where technology needs to go and building the enabling technology. Sometimes we're a little early for the market, but I think directionally we've been heading in the right direction for most of our investments. But when it came down to the final making the thing that the consumer bought, you know, I think that wasn't necessarily our core competency. And I think there is definitely a big benefit to focusing on what you're good at and making sure that you find partners who are good at what they're good at, and so the two go together. And so that's really our strategy. There's a really large boat.
The mobile devices have changed a lot in the last years. Sorry.
Yeah.
How can operators get benefits from the present state-of-the-art technology and the whole ecosystem of applications?
How are how are the operators going to benefit from the applications?
Yeah, of the new start of the art of technology and the present ecosystem of applications. Not just plain traffic. How can they get another benefit?
So one of the things that we've been really proponents of with the operators is making sure that they have a set of programming interfaces into the things that they control. So they control things like presence and billing and location, and actually they have a high degree of control over latency and quality of service and things like that. And I believe, and we called it a smart pipe at one point. I think the operators have a tremendous opportunity, even in a more horizontal ecosystem, to do that. Now, obviously, operators also have subsets of services that they want to try and control themselves. That battle back and forth between the operator-controlled service itself and the app developer or the over-the-top guy's service, I think that's going to continue for quite some time. But there are clearly things that the operator controls very well in their network, and there are definitely efforts out there to expand access to program interfaces to the network. So I think that we'll see more and more of that over time. Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing that they can do. And obviously, then they try and get some piece of the action on applications. And I mean, they try and get a little bit of other things as well. But yeah, it's not a foregone conclusion to me at all that an operator just has to say, okay, I'm just a dumb pipe, I'm just going to give bids, because it seems like they have a lot more to offer. One other thing that I think that an operator has that they underutilize is that, at least to me, it seems like there is a greater sense of trust between the person who, a customer of an operator and the operator. That people trust an operator with an awful lot of very sensitive information. And the operators have been pretty good historically at protecting that information. And I think that they under-monetize that opportunity to be a trusted, protector of your privacy or some sensitive information that you want to control but yet share in different ways. And so I think there are opportunities in those areas as well. But it's hard. A lot of operators look at it and they feel like they made certain initiatives, and then some over-the-top guy just came along and took it. And so I think some operators are a little gun shy. Other operators are still very focused. Okay, we're going to go try and build these services out. But I would say at this point in the history, there's I think operators are not all of the same mindset right now. Different operators are trying different strategies.
We have time for 2 more quick questions.
All right.
Okay. Mr. Jacobs, here's a question. A number of manufacturers, like HTC, for example, had to replace S4 processors in certain models in certain markets with the previous generation S3. Probably heard of that. And when I talked to them about that, they said that there were simply not enough S4s out there for them, and they implied that you guys probably have yield issues with 28nm process. So the question is, are you guys happy with the current level of control you have over the manufacturing process? And if no, what can be done to fix it? Thank you.
Yeah. So it's not a yield issue. It's simply a capacity issue. Not enough machines were put in the factory. The yield has gone pretty much as we expected. Some cases better. In the very, very earliest days, we had some unexpected things, but this was long ago, and they got fixed fairly rapidly. So yield has not been our problem. It is the case that people did build some devices around previous generation chips or lower tier chips just because we couldn't supply the 28nm chips. And then, relative to what we're doing on the manufacturing process, we do have process engineers. We are in the factory. We are helping to design the next generations of process technology. And so, we are taking an increasing amount of, responsibility, but at least engagement in the design of these new technologies. And how far that goes, I don't think we know yet. We had an earlier question about whether we were going to invest in our own fabs. It's not to that point.
But you're weighing those options.
We always weigh those options, but we like the way the fabless model works because we're not worried about filling the fab. There's other companies that can help defray the cost of building a fab, whether they come at the leading edge or they come at trailing edges of the technology. So it's not it's not something that's high on our list of things that we want to do, but I wouldn't rule it out completely in case we aren't able to make sure that we can secure our supply some other way.
Hi, my question is about brand. Qualcomm doesn't really sell its products directly to consumers, other companies do that. But I have noticed for the last few years a greater effort in brand, in trying to communicate, especially with the Snapdragon line of products, a greater effort to try to communicate those benefits to consumers. So my question is this perception correct? In the last few years, Qualcomm
Yes.
has been more focused on brand beyond?
Yes, that's correct. Really, what we see is that generally in the past we sold our chips to very technically sophisticated buyers, whether it was large manufacturers or wireless operators that could afford to invest in the lab to actually test the chips and see, okay, this chip is technically better than this other chip, and that gave us huge benefit as technology leaders. What we see now is that in addition to those channels, there are other channels, whether it's a retail channel or things that address the consumer more. And those channels don't necessarily have that degree of sophistication. They don't have large labs. It's not like the consumer can say, I can test chip A against chip B when I make my decision. So they're much more about, do I believe in the brand? What benchmarks do I listen to? What reviewers do I listen to? Those things. And those are much more traditional marketing things. We believe we have a benefit in marketing because we have the performance also, so that what we say is actually backed up by real-life performance, and that's a good place to be. But sometimes people just aren't even asking that question. They don't know enough. In fact, we've done some work. When you ask people what goes on inside their phone, they really have no idea. I mean, a phone is so magical to people. Like, how does it do what it does? That they actually don't have the notion that there's a chip in there that is doing all of this stuff that's giving them the performance that they expect, whether it's the connectivity or the graphics or the whatever it is that they're interested in. So we realize that we actually have to get people to understand that. You would think maybe because of all the work that a company like Intel's done on the PC side to talk about a chip inside a computer, that would be a natural jump, but it actually doesn't appear to be. When we do these focus groups, you ask people to draw what's inside their phone, and all sorts of interesting things come out. So.
It's time for a marketing campaign, Qualcomm Insight.
Yeah, something, I don't know, yeah. So, but that's, we've been definitely bringing up our branding around Snapdragon, and I think, you'll see that probably increase as time goes on. But, it's not, I think, generally, we're going to be an engineering-driven company. I always told people that if I spend $1 on engineering, pretty much know what I'm going to get. When I spend $1 on marketing, I'm not quite sure. So I just got to change my own mindset too. One more? Done? No. Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate the support and great questions, and I look forward to seeing more of you later. So thanks again.